So now that we have kind of a mental schema, what we want to do is think about functions like individual Lego bricks, very small pieces of code that do very, very specific work for our programs. We can start to think about, well, what do we need to actually make functions here in C++? And that is where we're going to continue here with 6.2 defining and calling functions. For those of you following along with the book, that is on 306. So every function has four pieces that we have to set up and know about first. So those are here in our table right above figure 6.2 or 6 dash rather 2, my mistake, 6 dash 2 here on page 306. So the first thing you will see is, and you can see it right here, we have int main and then the open parens. That has been where we have been putting all of our stuff so far in C++. What you didn't know was that was a function called this whole while. In C++, just as a quick side sortie here, we do need an int main. That has to be in the root directory for where it is that we are building our projects. Yes, when we're using Replit, when we're using online GDB, when we're using VS Code Online, services that are really platforms like that, a lot of the rules are kind of obstructed from us. But when we were, if rather, we were to use Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, Xcode, something else, that is a requirement when we are building our projects, that there's a main.cpp in the main directory of where we are trying to build our products. So that is here. So you can see first it starts with what is referred to as a return type. So what that means is when C++ is done running this particular function, so this particular function happens to be main that we're referring to here on the top of 306, you'll notice in our code we have always had a return 0, and you can see that right here towards the bottom, return 0. So what that's doing is that is C++ giving a receipt back essentially to, I have completed running this, in this case it's a function. We have treated it as an application this whole time, but it really is a function. So once that return is made, the 0 comes back. That means in the case of int main, at any rate, it is done running. Are there different return types that we could have? Yes, absolutely. Any of the cardinal data types that we have been using so far, we can use as a return type. So that means int, float, double, long float, all of the flavors of our numeric data types. We can return bools, we can return chars, and we can return strings. Is that, the curious student will ask, is that the list, the inclusive list of everything that C++ can return? No. No, it is not. But for right now, we can return ints and floats and doubles and chars and bools and strings. That will be, I think, for chapter 6, quite enough. So first and foremost, we have our return type. Next, we have to give it a name. A name, simply stated, is a description of what that function will do. You do not have to go completely and totally crazy here, but remember, when you are programming, you are working with the next developer in the chain, the next individual who is going to come by and work with your code. Probably that developer is going to be you. So if you name your functions 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that doesn't really describe to the next developer in the chain just what that function was supposed to do. A function that says get user ID tells a lot about what that function is supposed to do. A function that says, display vending machine tells a lot about what that function is supposed to do. A function that says, verify user ID tells a lot about what a function is supposed to do. So the name tells you as a developer, and it tells the next developer in the chain, hopefully, what it is that that function is supposed to be doing. Now, next will come a parameter list, and we will build on this as we go through the chapter. We will see what a what a function that can accept parameters will do. But essentially, a parameter list is anything that you can pass to a function that it can use. We will see examples of this. The example here on 306 does not have return values, so it does not take parameters. So we'll get there. Please, please, please just hang on for 6.3 and 4, and we'll see it again in the code samples at the end of the chapter. So a parameter list is anything that that function can receive to do work with. That's very, very handy, and we will see it in short order. And then finally, we have the function body. That is everything in between the opening and closing curly braces that we do, you know, to prosecute what that particular function is supposed to do. So you'll notice this whole while with int main, we have had all of these pieces. We have had a return type, that's int. We have had a name, main. We have had a parameters list. The empty parens that follows int main just simply means that it is not passed any parameters. And a body, the opening and closing curly braces that follows our function. Fantastic. There we go. We have been using a function this whole while, and we've been doing it successfully. Congratulations. Now we're going to get an opportunity to build our own. So before we can let you go to 6.3, we have one more piece to have to deal with here, and that is to call a function. So I'm just going to go past this. We are going to see, so this is program 6-1, and we are going to see in the program, or the code samples rather, videos later on, calling of functions. You do not have to worry about being orphaned from this for too long. So we can see on lines 10, 11, 12, and 13, we have our function definition. So a function definition is all of those things we talked about already. It is a return type, it is a name, it is a parameter list, and it is a body. So here on 10 through 13, we have all of those things. A void function, which I have neglected talking about up until now, simply returns nothing. It does something and goes away. For the most part, this would be things that we display to the screen for the user. For the most part, this might be things that we even have an opportunity to give to, like, a file, for example. We'll see some file operations that are void later in this chapter. So void does not require a return type. It can, however, still take a parameter list. This particular function called display message, you can see takes no parameters because it has that empty parens after it. And the only thing the display message function does is display hello from function display message. That is all this does. So this is a pretty perfect example of a single purpose function. It literally does the thing it tells you it is going to do. The only thing display message does is display that message. Now, please, I understand. As a beginning developer, you're going to look at that and go, you're telling me I used 4 lines of code, 4 very short lines of code, in order to make one cout statement. Yeah, that is exactly what you did here. I'm not sure that that's going to save me any time as I go through and actually do my structural top to bottom, left to right in that order exclusively, concrete sequential programming. You are right as far as this particular function goes. You got me. That is true. However, when we build more, dense pieces of code, display vending machine, each one of those vending machines was worth certainly more than 1 line of code. And to be able to call to that time and time again without making mistakes, with avoiding sloppy copy errors, to call 1 line of code, or to call rather to that function with 1 line of code, is fantastic. So now that we're talking about calling to our function, which is named display message, you can see right here in lines 19 through 25, we have the rest of our main function. So on line number 21, we are displaying a cout hello from inside of main. And then next on 22, you can see we have what is referred to as a function call. So on line 22, what we see is display message and then the empty, in this case, it's an empty set of parens. And then obviously, because it's the end of our line, we will have our semicolon there. What this tells C++ to do is go to the location of our function called display message. One other, and I know I've been adding a few of these here as we've been going along. One other thing to be aware of is the function names are case sensitive. So lowercase d, capital M, display messages is different from lowercase d, lowercase m, display messages. As with everything else in C++, it's highly typed and it's also very, very specific. So do remember case sensitivity here. So we have seen a lot here just on pages 306 through 308. So the things to remember here before we can continue to 6.3. Number one is a function has, my mouse goes the other way, my function has a return type, so int or float or double or char or string or bool or void, a void which returns nothing. It has a name, display messages in this case. It has a parameter list. The things inside of those parens that the function is going to take from another location. This function does not have anything in the parameter list, which is fine, in which case we just have an empty parentheses. And finally, it has a body, the work that it does inside of the opening and closing curly brace. That was a lot of stuff for 6.2. There's more,